In the dark pages of human history, there is a name that has not been forgotten for thousands of years. This name is Atlantis. Atlantis does not only symbolize a lost continent, it represents the potential humanity has lost, the brightest era it might once have reached. But the story of Atlantis is not a product of the modern age. Its roots go back to one of the most respected thinkers of ancient times, Plato. Plato described Atlantis in such detail in his works, Timaeus and Critias, written 2,400 years ago, that it resembles a historical record more than a tale. He not only describes the continent, but also presents a long narrative of the structure of the society, the layout of the city, the administrative system, its geography, its wars, and even its destruction. According to him, Atlantis was a civilization with vast agricultural areas, rich mines, water channels, gigantic structures, and a surprisingly modern urban layout spanning hundreds of kilometers. Moreover, their central cities were planned in circular rings. In the outer rings there were ports, sea routes, and trade centers. In the inner rings there were temples, palaces, and buildings. Even today, this plan is considered extremely logical and advanced when examined in terms of modern urban planning. Because the city is in an ideal situation in terms of defense, transportation, and economic organization. For this reason, some scholars think that it is unlikely Plato wrote this entirely from imagination. They argue that in order to conceive such architecture in his mind, he must have been inspired by civilizations like ancient Egypt or Crete, which had similar layouts. However, the story of Atlantis does not end here. Plato states that he received this information from scholars who studied ancient inscriptions in Egypt. According to him, Egyptian priests preserved records from a much older period, dating back thousands of years before Greek history. Because according to the Egyptian priests, humanity had faced great disasters many times. Some civilizations had been completely destroyed, knowledge had been lost, and histories had restarted. This narrative is actually found in the myths of other civilizations as well. For example, the Mesopotamian flood epics, Sumer tablets, Gilgamesh, the Vendidad texts in Iran, the great flood stories in Hindu mythology. Almost all of them contain narratives that point to the existence of a very great civilization that disappeared in the past. Therefore, the origin of Atlantis may not rely solely on Plato. It may be a reflection of a much older memory. Plato states that the Atlanteans were tall, strong, well-charactered, and disciplined people. They were not only warriors, but also productive, knowledgeable, and a society that valued balance. Since the continent was very large, different towns, cities, ports, and mines existed in different regions. One of the most striking features of the Atlanteans was their advanced engineering understanding, which was in harmony with nature. They organized water channels with incredible mathematical precision and planned their ports so that gigantic ships could easily enter and exit. Some of their temples were covered with metals, especially the reddish metal called orichalcum, according to Plato's description, was even more valuable than gold. What this metal might be is still a subject of debate in the modern era. Some researchers think it may have been an alloy of copper and zinc. Others argue that it was a more special and currently unknown metal. If the Atlanteans were so advanced, then why did they collapse? According to Plato's account, the people of Atlantis were initially virtuous, orderly, and peaceful. But over time, their increasing power, expanding territory, and military superiority led them down a different path. The desire to dominate surrounding peoples emerged. Expeditions began to overseize lands. This aggressive attitude caused internal corruption. Plato specifically states that their divine side weakened while their human and ambitious side strengthened. This expression is still interpreted today. According to some, this means that the Atlanteans lost their spiritual values. According to others, it refers to the uncontrolled misuse of scientific progress. Because in modern theories there are very interesting claims about Atlantis, advanced energy systems, unknown crystal technologies, and even high-frequency machines. Although these are not scientifically verified, there have been groups who claimed that Atlantis was destroyed due to uncontrolled energy usage. Atlantis was destroyed by a great disaster that occurred in a very short time. Massive tremors from beneath the earth, rock ruptures, consecutive earthquakes. Then huge waves swallowed the continent in an instant. When this narrative is compared with modern geology, it shows interesting similarities. There have been land masses in history that sank in a short time. For example, some islands destroyed by the Krakatoa eruption in Indonesia, small land masses submerged near Japan, and regions that disappeared after the Thera Santorini eruption in the Mediterranean. In short, the sudden destruction of an entire society in a day or a week is not scientifically impossible. Are there other ancient sources that knew Atlantis? Yes, and this is a highly debated topic. There is no other ancient source that directly recounts Atlantis besides Plato. But there are indirect hints. Herodotus draws strange islands in the Atlantic Ocean on some of his maps. Diodorus Siculus mentions a great island beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Strabo talks about the possibility of remnants of an ancient civilization in the Atlantic Ocean. Egyptian tablets and wall inscriptions mention lands swallowed by the sea. According to some researchers, Plato may have combined all these old narratives. According to others, Plato told only a symbolic story. But the extremely high level of detail of this story distinguishes it from other myths in history. Because Plato normally does not treat fantastical elements with such detail. By the Renaissance, some old maps interestingly reignited the Atlantis debate. Especially the 1513 Piri Reis map shows the coasts of South America almost with millimetric accuracy. Moreover, some drawings on the map resemble the ice-free form of Antarctica. This brings up the question, could this information have been taken from a much older civilization? Additionally, the Orontius Phaneus map, Mercator maps, and some medieval drawings point to large islands in the Atlantic Ocean. Their central positions almost perfectly coincide with the place Plato described. Many Atlantis researchers say that the source information for these maps may rely on a lost civilization. Atlantis ceased to be merely an ancient myth long ago. New claims put forward in the 19th and 20th centuries, sonar scans in ocean depths, strange structures discovered in different regions, and the increasing scientific debates have made Atlantis perhaps more fascinating than ever. Today, research on Atlantis includes not only historians but also geologists, archaeologists, oceanographers, and map experts. Because the questions are simple, but the answers remain unknown. Did Atlantis really exist? If it did, where was it? And what destroyed it? In this section, we embark on a great journey toward all the theories, evidence, debates, and discoveries brought to light by the modern world. Although Blavatsky's writings were not accepted by the scientific world, she is remembered as the person who introduced the idea that Atlantis was a lost mother civilization to modern thought. As we mentioned earlier, William Scott Elliot had an Atlantis theory. It was a civilization with more than one era. The size of the continent changed at different times. There were energy centers, crystal towers, and pyramid-like structures in its geography. The maps Scott Elliot created are still examined today by Atlantis researchers. In his drawings, Atlantis appears as a giant continent covering most of the Atlantic Ocean, with a circular city at its center. Although not scientifically accepted, he is one of the figures who shaped the modern face of the legend. Ignatius Donnelly, The Scientific Foundations of Atlantis. The first person to try to place Atlantis research on a scientific basis was the American researcher Ignatius Donnelly. His book, Atlantis, The Antediluvian World, published in 1882, created widespread impact. Outside the modern theory, there are many continents or islands that disappeared or were submerged without a known cause. 1. The continent of Mu 2. Lemuria. In popular culture and the rebirth of Atlantis. By the 20th century, Atlantis was no longer only a subject of research. It had become one of the most important figures in popular culture. It had ceased to be just a legend and had become a civilization living in the imagination of millions of people. This popularity even accelerated scientific research, because as interest grew, more people started to focus on the subject. Today, Atlantis still stands as an unsolved mystery. It may have existed. Its existence has not been proven, but its non-existence has also not been definitively disproven. Perhaps what makes Atlantis so magical is exactly this, both within our reach and forever out of reach. Science, mythology, history, and imagination all converge in Atlantis. According to some, Atlantis is purely fictional. According to others, humanity has a much older past than believed, and Atlantis is the key to this truth. Maybe one day the long-searched-for structure will be discovered in the depths of the ocean. Maybe, for the first time in history, we will find the first traces of a civilization forgotten by the world. Or maybe Atlantis will never be found. And for that reason, humanity will never stop searching for it. Because some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some are meant to lead us to the dark doors of the past, to make us wonder more. And Atlantis continues to whisper humanity's greatest question. We have reached the end of our video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and like.